Okay, here we are, Ligeia part 2. Um, so, yeah, all right. Now, a lot of you have commented on if I could take the temperature, as it were, of the whole class. Most of y'all are like, this guy's nuts. Okay, this is all in his head. He's high. He's grieving the loss of his wife. One of you said he hasn't slept, right? He sounds like someone in the midst of the coronavirus or something like that, right? It's a bad joke. I shouldn't have said that too soon. So his state of mind, he's fantasizing all this. I think everyone in the class seemed to agree with that, you don't read this as a straight up ghost story. He's minding his own business, he's fine. And it's just that Ligeia is so smart, so full of love, um, has such incredible supernatural abilities that she came back from the dead to be with her man. It's a heck of a love story, isn't it? Man, okay? But I don't think there's one I don't think there's one of you that bought that story, and that's fine. Um, Everyone to one degree or another was saying it's in his head. But the question is, how much is in his head? How much? Okay, so let's break it down this way. How, you know, yeah, well, first of all, what's the evidence that Poe is giving us that the guy's nuts or he's high or whatever else? It says several times. I already gave one example of where the narrator is saying he was high. There's another example of this. It's over on page 624, where he says he's high. I think all told he says it maybe 3 times. 624, about 10 lines from the top. I had become a bounden slave in the trammels of opium, and my labors and my orders had taken a coloring from my dreams. Okay, so he's even admitting he's not seeing things quite. What he's seeing is just he's not having nightmares, he's having daymares. um, okay, so he himself even seems to suggest this. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is that we have to consider, did he have a perfect love affair with his current wife, Rowena? Not exactly. As a lot of you were saying that they hated each other. And this comes out the next page over, 625. I loathed her. Not just, she kind of gets on my nerves. Loathed her. Man, I loathed her with a hatred belonging more to demon than to man. Wow, that's some pretty ripe hatred there, okay? So there's another logical leap that Poe is inviting us here to make. Okay, let me just ask it this way. I wish you all were here so I could see the expression on your faces. But let me just ask it this way. Do you think the narrator hates Rowena enough to murder her? What do you think? Does he hate her enough to murder her? Okay. So we saw where in part 1, here's the goblet, and gee, I don't know, a ghost came along or some mysterious presence I just saw, Your Honor. A few drops fall into her wine from thin air. I don't know how they got there, right? And she guzzles it down. Well, it must have been Ligeia, right? Wouldn't a more logical explanation be that he himself is the one that poisoned Rowena, right? As he's pouring out the wine in here, he just happens to slip a little poison in there too, right? That he hated her enough to kill her. There's evidence for that too, folks. Okay. So that would be another possibility. He's high, he's a drug addict, and he's a murderer. Okay? All right, just saying. The text supports a reading like that too. But do you see how much fun this story is? There's evidence to suggest that this is a straight up ghost story, right? Ligeia is a vampire or a zombie or, who knows what she is, right? Her love for her man was so great she could break the chains of death and come back to be with her man. But the story also supports a very different reading, that the narrator is stoned out of his mind and he's a murderer. And he's so stoned, he doesn't even remember what he did when he was stoned. Okay? So which is it? This is why we say that the practitioners of the Gothic love impenetrable mystery. Okay? That we will never, ever, ever have a clear answer to that question. Okay? So, okay. Well, let's look at a few other pieces here to this. Look over on page 627. My favorite band, by the way, is The Who. Okay? Just saying. Okay, 627. And we're going to see some other elements of this story, which is suggesting here that it's his own frame of mind, his own mindset, his own fantasy life that's bringing Ligeia back from the dead. She herself isn't doing it. It's just this guy in fantasy land, all right? Or not just fantasy land, stoned out of his mind land, okay? He's tripping, okay? 627. All right, this is midway down 627. So here's the scene now. Rowena is just lying out here, because back in these days, they didn't have undertakers and funeral homes and stuff. Someone dies, and they'd say you just lay them out at home. And through reasonable amount of time for mourning, visitors come in and pay their respects. All this is done in someone's house, okay? Then they're taken off for burial. There weren't undertakers, there weren't funeral homes, embalmment, all that stuff. You just did it yourself in your own family house there. So this is the scene. He's home, there's Rowena lying out dead. And so he's keeping vigil over the body. So he's keeping up the appearances of being a dutiful husband, grieving appropriately over his deceased wife. So there he is, but we know something else, right? As one or two of you pointed out, as he's sitting there, and there's Rowena, okay? Who's he thinking about? He ain't thinking about Rowena, That's not a very nice guy, is it? He's thinking about Ligeia. He's thinking about Ligeia, man. Okay, now watch the connection between his thoughts about Ligeia and what's happening over here on this bier, right, where Rowena is laying out, okay? Through a species of unutterable horror and awe, boy, that's the language of the Gothic, isn't it? Benjamin Franklin didn't talk about horror and awe, neither did Susanna Rosen, all right? For which the language of mortality has no sufficiently energetic expression. Okay, that's the stuff of the Gothic too. Anytime you have some kind of feeling that mere rational language can't express. These are feelings that go beyond the capacity of mere language to express. That's a sign of the Gothic. My heart ceased to beat, my limbs grow rigid where I sat. When's the last time you felt that way? I can't remember when I ever felt that freaked out about anything. It's been a while, long time, okay? These are highly unusual. This is a highly unusual emotional state. But again, this is the stuff of the Gothic. Okay, sorry, that's a little bit of a side note here. But anyway, So he's in a highly excited Gothic state here. All right, now skip down. Okay, I fell back with a shudder upon the ottoman from which I had been so startlingly aroused, and again gave myself up to passionate waking visions of Ligeia. So he's thinking about Ligeia, right? Now let's see what happens now. So he's fantasizing about Ligeia. An hour thus elapsed when, could it be possible? I was a second time aware of some vague sound issuing from the region of the bed. I listened in extremity of horror. Extreme Gothic state here, folks. The sound came again. It was a sigh. Rushing to the corpse, I distinctly saw, a tremor upon the lips. Okay, you see what's starting to happen? Whenever he's thinking about Ligeia, that's when the body starts to move around, okay? So maybe it's just all a projection of his fantasy onto Rowena. It's not reality, all right? It's his own crazy, horror-stricken mind that's creating this fantasy. Okay, so he sees some movement over here, so then he runs over. To his credit, he thinks Rowena maybe is coming back to life. This was actually a very common fear back in these days, the idea of premature burial. And Poe himself was afraid of premature burial. In fact, he even has a story called Premature Burial. So basically, he's going to try to revive her so she doesn't get buried prematurely, okay? They think she's dead, but she's really not. Rushes over. I chafed and bathed the temples and the hands and used every exertion which my experience and no little medical training could suggest, but in vain. Suddenly the color fled, the pulsation ceased, the lips resumed the expression of the dead, and in an instant afterwards, the whole body took upon itself the icy chillness, the livid hue, the intense rigidity, the sunken outline, and each and all of the loathsome peculiarities of that which has been for many days a tenant of the tomb. Ooh, okay, so just going back to being a dead body again. Okay, so it's like, all right, she dead. I can give up and sit back down. So that's what he does. Sure enough, he starts fantasizing about Ligeia again, right? One heck of a guy. Again, I sunk into visions of Ligeia. And again, what marvel that I shudder while I write. Again, there reached my ears a low sob from the region of the ebony bed. So whenever he's thinking about Ligeia, that's when Rowena's body seems to stir. Okay, skip down a few lines. And the corpse of Rowena once again stirred, of which extreme awe was perhaps the least terrible, the least consuming, okay? And this isn't all. She isn't just fidgeting around. Now watch what happens. I could at least doubt no longer when arising from the bed, tottering with feeble steps. Now she's like Frankenstein here, right? Or the mummy, tottering with feeble steps, right? With the air of one bewildered in a dream. The Lady of Tremaine stood palpably before me. Okay, so she's walking over to him, right? You know, what would you do? This guy is obviously freaking out, okay? If he's imagining it, he's freaking out, obviously. If it's really happening, it's freaking him out. It's freaking us out too. What makes it such a great story. Okay, now skip down what happens. So he thinks, because, she's wrapped in burial cloth and everything, right? So walking over, I guess sort of like the mummy, okay? And all the while, he still thinks this is Rowena, all right? So now what? But had she then grown taller since her malady? With inexpressible madness seized me with that thought. One bound and I had reached her feet. So again, he's, at least to his credit, he's not running away and grabbing a gun or something. You know, he's still trying to help if he can. Shrinking from my touch, she let fall from her head, unloosened the ghastly cerements which had confined it. And there streamed forth into the rushing atmosphere of the chamber huge masses of long and disheveled hair. It was blacker than the raven wings of midnight. Okay? Does that sound like Rowena's hair? She was very fair-skinned and everything. Okay? That matches the hair of Ligeia, doesn't it? And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We can't pick up on this now. But back in these days, all right, women wore their hair all bound up in these nice hats and kept it all pinned up and nice and confined and everything, and a nice chapeau, right? Okay? Whenever in a novel or a story from this time period, if women's hair is flowing free like this, okay, this is a highly erotic image, okay? Women's hair flowing freely. It's an image of incredible sexuality. It's kind of fun, right? We're dealing with a highly erotic corpse. This is a very sexy corpse, folks, right? And don't, you know, hey, it's not me making this up. I'm just telling you what's in the dang story and presenting some cultural context. You know, I couldn't make this stuff up, all right? This is why people have said, critics over the years, Poe had a real thing for dead women, okay? For Poe, Ligeia is an incredibly smoking hot corpse, okay? True, all right? I'm here all alone in my home, right? And, you know, I think this is hilarious. I don't know, okay? Well, good thing my neighbors can't hear me talking about sexy corpses and stuff. Someone's going to call the cops if they hear what I'm talking about. All right, and now the eyes opened of the figure which stood before me. Here at last, I shrieked out loud. Can I never be mistaken? These are the full, the black, and the wild eyes of the Lady Ligeia. Wow, okay. Is that true love? Ligeia breaking the bonds of death? Or is this the fantasy of a madman? Of a really stoned madman who's also a murderer? You get to decide, okay? I wish I had an answer for you. But this is the way Poe loved to write stories, to make us think and wonder and try to figure out. Okay, well, let me leave it at that then. And I hope you're watching this video late at night so you will have very sweet dreams. Okay? All right. Good night.